Welcome to Mind of a Scientist. It is my great honor to welcome Morris Brink to speak with us today. Thank you so much for being here, Morris.
Hello, and thank you, Rosalie. I appreciate it. It's nice to be here on this ever so hot summer day in early July, July 7th. Record-breaking temperatures up in the Northwest. I live up here in Auburn, and fortunately, not Sebastopol, where I was raised, and temperatures are rising and rising. Climate is changing. Things are changing. Over the years, have settled in on the industry of horticulture for my profession. I've built up a skill set around environmental systems and closed environment agriculture. So I learned about environmental systems in commercial greenhouses that really almost all food starts out with, if not grown to completion like a lettuce or tomato, but as a start. A lot of outdoor row crops start from small little plants in a greenhouse. I currently co-run a business that I started called the Silverback Advisory Group, and I'd like to tell you about it, tell you about my process through high school, college, my first work experiences leading up to horticulture, leading up to acquiring my knowledge base, and eventually going out on my own and being self-employed as I currently am. I do have a PowerPoint that I'm going to use kind of as my outline, and I welcome questions at the end. If there are any, again, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Morris Brink, once again. Silverback Advisory Group is a mainly cannabis consulting group. I bring to the table the skill set of environmental systems for growing in, as I said, closed environmental ag, CEA. Once again, my skill set comes from greenhouses, but all my knowledge base goes directly to warehouse growing, which seems to be the preferred method to grow premium cannabis. I have a lot of experience in this field, which I'll go through. And this last little blurb here, which is just from a previous speech I did in the industry. I did graduate from Davis in Ag Econ with emphasis in business and marketing. So I assume my target audience right now is high schoolers and people who are deciding what to do next. I went to Anley High School. I was third generation. My daughter just graduated from Anley. And when she was a child, she wanted to be an ice cream maker. When I was a child, I thought my dad worked at UPS because all these brown trucks would always go to our door and give us packages. And somehow as a child, I wanted to be a business guy. I wanted to work in a big building and wear a suit and have a long, fancy car with tinted windows. But as I went through college, under kind of an agricultural business degree, I realized that I did want to go into agriculture more, mainly based from my Sebastopol roots of agriculture. My grandfather was an apple rancher. He had an apple cannery, which is now Taft Street Winery, Silvera and O'Connell. He made juice and sauce and vinegars. So I was raised around that and seeing his hard work, working with the land, with his hands, working with other people, and that had great interest for me. What's important for you is, I guess, the question that you need to decide, or at least think about and have a trajectory of a direction that you want to go in now that you're leaving high school and going to college. What's important to you? Is work important to you? Do you want to work a lot? Is family important to you? Is travel? Is education? More core values perhaps is money, religion, sex, fame. What's important to you? And is the balance of that. I find if I'm not exercising or if I don't eat right, that I then don't sleep as well and perhaps don't work as well. For me to be at my optimal level of performance, need to have everything in balance, which life isn't always that way. And it's a struggle. And life is not about graduating from college or getting that job that you've always wanted or to enter in that profession or work with that professor. It's the road, it's the bumps, it's every moment, it's now. And that's the balance of being present and balancing all of your wants to achieve your desires. So, a little bit about my history. I went to Anley High School. I wasn't a great student, I was a B student. I liked school, but it was more of a social thing for me, and I had a lot of fun. I wasn't able to get into a 4 year school that I wanted to. So I ended up going to the JC, which was a great experience. It's a wonderful school, and the cost is right. I did live on my own in Santa Rosa. I have always had a job going through school. So I had a full time job and went to school full time at the SRJC. After 2.5 years, because I take longer than some people, of going to the JC, I took a semester off and I traveled for 6 months. I went to school in Europe and Germany for a few months, and I traveled throughout Europe, which opened my eyes. I never thought I wanted to settle in a small town like Sebastopol, but once I traveled and saw all these other countries, I really appreciated what we have in Sonoma County, and now just a few hours away in Auburn. Every time I drive into Sonoma County, I realize how green it is and how special it is. Agriculture now are grapes. It used to be apples, but they're still agriculture, and it's a wonderful place to be. After I traveled, I traveled after I got accepted into UC Davis, and I returned, and I knew I was going into agricultural economics with emphasis in management and business, or management and marketing. So I was essentially groomed to run my own agricultural business, whatever that might be. Once again, it's the balance. I had a lot of fun. I didn't get straight A's in school. I still kept my B average. I worked full time, and it was a lot. It's a lot going to school, and you have to really be focused. I was not focused on what was going to happen after graduating. I knew I wanted to be in business somehow, and now I kind of turn my trajectory from working in a big fancy high rise, et cetera, to something in agriculture. I also wanted to have fun. I also met a lot of friends. You get in a relationship, maybe you have to work or not, but it's a balance, and it's tough to get through. And even if you go through like many of my friends did in graduating English or something, or philosophy, it's not that you have that degree in English or philosophy, but you have that experience that you went to school, that you can succeed through great strife sometimes and pass. And through that accomplishment, I accomplished a lot of projects. I happened to stayed in my industry with time, but it's just the process of going. It's the passage from high school to further learning, gaining yourself, learning about yourself, to the work world, which seems to be fun and great as you're looking from a high school eyes, but man, it's responsibility. You get bills, and you no longer just have a cell phone bill. Maybe then you have a car bill, and soon a house bill, and then there's kids, and there's college, and retirement, and you want to squeeze in a vacation, and it's balance again. So enjoy your time in school. Don't rush. Keep things in perspective. But I did graduate from Davis, and wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I was really into environmentalism at the time, especially since going to Davis. I was Save the Rainforest was the big cry of the 80s and 90s. So I wanted to save a tree. I worked instead of CalPIRG, the California Public Interest Research Group, I worked for MassPIRG in Massachusetts. And I worked at a couple colleges, Berkshire Community College and Williams College, and Ivy League College in the Berkshires, and led college kids through environmental and consumer protection campaigns wanting to save a tree. But I realized, man, that's a lot of work, and it's a lot of political work, and you have to knock on doors and make phone calls and ask for money. And although I was saving a tree, I wasn't hugging a tree, and it didn't feel warm and fuzzy. So it wasn't for me. I moved back to California and was still kind of trying to find my way and wanting to have fun. I worked at a kayak place in Santa Rosa and managed the kayak shop. I worked for the Berry Public Brewing Company and managed the bar and then all the off-site sales. I worked in Navarro Vineyards in Anderson Valley, thinking that we would move up there and buy some property. And then my partner and I wanted to have kids and wanted to get married. So I felt like I needed to be more responsible and make more money. During that time too, Prop 215 in California passed. Cannabis was now legal to grow medicinally with the script system. So man, cannabis I grew. I didn't grow necessarily for altruistic reasons. I grew for money. Slinging pounds for $5,000 a pound back then, quasi legal, was good money, and I still had a job. Um, but that gave me an insight to the industry of cannabis. With that insight, I did get a job at Hydro Farm based out of Petaluma. They are one of the largest hydroponic retailers selling to resellers. It's a wholesale company selling to resellers for all these hydroponic shops throughout the nation, selling lights, nutrients, hydroponic systems, etc. The cannabis world is finicky. It's a bunch of ego. It's a bunch of folks who can do it better than you, and they want to crank it to 11. And there's a lot of flash and ego's big, and it was not really my cup of tea. So I wanted to go more to the commercial world with cut flowers, bedding plants, and vegetable production. So I got a job with True Leaf Technologies based out of Katati. Also Biotherm Solutions is the same company. And I worked there for over 12 years, 13 years. And that's where I really learned my skill set of environmental systems in a greenhouse, heating, well, I'll go into the different systems, but I learned that base there. And I worked with a lot of engineers, and that base is still what I use today with Silverback. I got recruited by Argus Controls from True Leaf Technologies, working essentially sales on the West Coast, west of the Rockies. I got recruited by another company, Urban Grow, after a couple of years, based out of Denver. They are a systems integrator for cannabis mainly, but they're starting to do vegetable production as well. And somewhere in that time, when I started working from Argus, just before that, I started Silverback Advisory Group. I think it's been about 6 years now, and currently I'm doing that full time. So what I do is I help people grow better. I mainly deal in cannabis, as Urban Grow does, but I also deal in lettuce, tomato, vegetable and fruit production, cut flower production, bedding plants. If you buy a plant at Home Depot or Lowe's, that came from a greenhouse somewhere. It came as a greenhouse as the seed popped or the clone was rooted. It was put into a bigger pot to grow out, and often it goes to a different greenhouse grower to have that pot uh, uh, grow into color. So if it's a petunia, it's pink, and then it turns pink. And then they sell them to Home Depot and Lowe's. And I help cannabis grow better. A lot of the cannabis growers come from the dark side, growing in their basement, their garage, their attic, and they were marketed by certain people who wanted their money, knowing that they were making lots of money per pound. So everything was overpriced and not sustainable for scaling up. With my knowledge base of the commercial closed environment agriculture, I was able to make the bridge from growing cannabis in your garage to growing cannabis on an acre or 5 acres or 10 acres or 20 acres, which is interesting. So I'm not an engineer. I'm not a scientist. I got a BS. I did not get my master's. I did not get my doctorate. But I do work with engineers and scientists, and have for my last multiple employers. So I work with vendors, and these vendors are perhaps LED manufacturers, and I sell their LEDs, but I work with their engineers who develop their LEDs. And I might say, hey, man, we need a little higher frequency in red for the cannabis guys. And they'll make a light for me who I can then sell to my target market. Through that LED manufacturer, they'll give me some software. And through the software, if you have 30 by 100 space with the 14-foot sidewalls, and you want 1,200 micromoles 12 hours a day, I have a software program that spaces the lights correctly in vertical and horizontal planes, so I can provide the lighting solution that you want. That program was made by engineers. My clients are engineers. I've worked with all the big pharma companies. I've signed NDAs with all of them, so I can't really say them all, but I will say that I've been in Monsanto's headquarters and had a tour, and they, although I don't agree in GMO genetically modified foods, their stance is food for all people, and they're making genetically modified food to feed the masses. They are doing great work in their minds. I've worked with all the other large corporations like Monsanto. I've worked with numerous universities, botanical gardens, and a very large vegetable bedding plant and cut flower producers, mainly west of the Rockies, but also throughout the nation. So, where is science and horticulture? There's an array of different things that you, if you want to get into engineering and science, can do so. There's heat loss calculations in a greenhouse. If you're in a cold region, you have to heat your structure more. Well, depending on your glazings, what are the materials of your walls and your roof? There's calculations that show that your structure will have 1,000,000 BTUs of heat loss on the coldest winter days. So on that day, if you want to hold that temperature inside, you have to have 1,000,000 BTUs of heat, whatever that is. Also, heat gain during a hot summer day. Solar gain will raise the temperature in your greenhouse, so you'll need cooling methods. There's calculations for that. There's technologies and systems for that. Engineers and scientists make that. I'm just going to kind of go down this if you haven't already. Visually, air movement. Air movement is key to a consistent environmental growing system. If you don't have proper air movement, you might have a hot pocket and a humid pocket, which will cause disease and um, insect pressure. So having a perfectly homogeneous environment will often increase your success in a consistent crop turn after turn after turn. Irrigation cycles. Historically, growers irrigate too long and fertilize too much. How can we throttle that back and be more sustainable? Irrigate at shorter doses, sometimes without fertilizer if the medium of the plant already has enough fertilizer, maybe just water. How can we reduce water usage, reduce fertilizer uses? CO2 consumption. Plants consume CO2. How can they consume more? If you're in a greenhouse, how do you get the CO2 in the greenhouse? Light. If you're growing in a warehouse or if you need daylight extension for a crop in your greenhouse, how do you extend the light? What kind of lighting source do you use? The sun? Great. An HID, very energy extensive. An HID light is a very energy using light versus an LED conserves energy. Planting mediums, are you going to grow in the soil organically? No till. Is it going to be hydroponic? No soil. Is that going to be rock wool? Cocoa core? What are the benefits of each? Genetics. Genetics is a big thing, not only in hybridization of growing corn or lettuce or flowers or cannabis, but also GMOs, genetically modified organisms. How do you make crops quicker, taste better, last longer, grow in more rigorous environments? All those things can be modified and enhanced through genetics. Computer controls. If you have a growing environment, you want your heating system to work with your cooling system. If not, they work together. So computer control, collecting data, having alarms, tracking your growing cycles will allow you to have consistent crops with high quality. And that's what you want. Consistent, high quality, low energy usage. Logistics, once you grow that crop, how do you get it to the consumer? How do you get all the inputs to grow that crop? Optimization of irrigation, CO2 usage, logistics. Sustainability, we want to use less resources but grow bigger crops. Reduce, recycle, reuse. Are you a science-based person? Because in my experience, there's a lot of scientists and engineers who aren't social, and there are engineers and scientists who are social. So being an engineer who can speak to others, you can communicate your ideas in a way that someone else who's not a scientist can hear them. If you're a scientist that doesn't have that skill, then someone like me or a bridge to take the engineer and scientist data and experiences and bridge them to the consumer or the person who's going to use those. I find an engineer or scientist with strong social capabilities is sometimes hard to find. So if you aren't a scientist or an engineer like me, you still can work with them and be that bridge and bring cutting edge technology to the industry of your choice. So I'm just realizing based on time that I'm going to give you half my presentation and then open up for questions. So you kind of experienced through my dialogue so far, how did I get to my point currently? I work with Silverback Advisory Group. I have a couple business partners. What do I do daily? I'm on the phone. I work from home. I do emails. I respond to emails. I get data. I get information from a client, and I put that into my different software modules, and I create solutions that are energy efficient, sustainable, and helps them grow a large, high quality, consistent crop. So I'm on the computer a lot. I travel. With COVID, I didn't travel as much, but I travel up to 50% of my time per month. That's 2 weeks a month. Sometimes I travel 1 week a month. That's 25%. But that is airports and that is long drives. That was fun. 20 something, 30 something, 40 something got a little old. I'm 50 now, and I don't like to travel as much. So I travel when I have to. COVID has shown that you don't always have to be face to face, but being face to face once, seeing the site once, often has a lot of value. So once I travel, I am in a greenhouse. I'm in a warehouse. I'm talking to the growers. I'm talking to the owners. The owners have a different talk than the growers. They have different wants. The facility manager has different wants and has different talks. Who should I talk to for a heating upgrade for this facility? Who should I talk to provide a whole turnkey greenhouse solution for a brand new project? You know, the grower has a voice, but the owners, they're writing the checks. So traveling, seeing the right people, being on site, collecting data, providing the solutions. That's what I do. Some days I don't work much. Some weeks I work 20 hours. When I travel, some weeks I work 80 hours. Money comes and goes when you're self-employed. Uh, some weeks I don't make anything, but I have projects and I'm bidding. Some weeks I make a lot of money and I can live off of 1 year if I have one big project. My margins on a project, if I sell $1 million project, is 5%, 5,000 bucks, or 30%, uh, $300,000, so $50,000 or $300,000, 30%, $300,000 for a project for maybe some weeks and months of time. That's not bad, and having one of those a year plus a couple small projects, that floats me. Um, so I started gaining my skill set with commercial horticulture, bedding plants, cut flowers, biotech. I also was growing guerrilla styles, quasi legal Prop 215 in California cannabis. Why did cannabis, or why does it still interest me? I told you the players in cannabis, especially if they've been grown over 20 or 30 years, have big egos and say they're going to write you the check or give you the cash tomorrow, but they don't. And it's waiting, and it's not business people. And they often aren't educated, which doesn't mean everything, but they don't know business etiquette. Cannabis and hemp have a lot of other markets. It's exciting, state by state, country by country, as markets open up. It's a new, exciting area. Uh, Unfortunately, each entity, New Hampshire, Germany, they try to build their laws from scratch. There's a lot of failures, but there's a lot of great benefits medically. There's all sorts of cures that hemp or CBD or cannabis, THC, or so the various terpenes can aid for ailments. Textiles, man, there's a lot of lobbyists against cannabis and hemp because of textiles. Hemp specifically can replace paper usage. It grows way quicker than trees. Per square foot annually, you could produce way more in hemp because it's renewable. You can have multiple crops versus trees. Lumber, you can make hemp into wood-like products. Concrete, there's hempcrete already on the market using hemp fiber. What other textiles can hemp be used for? Drinking. I used to drink a lot and I don't anymore. I use cannabis on a low level instead of drinking. Cannabis and hemp is both interesting because as these new markets emerge, the marketing beast, the owners of all corporations want you to consume. You to consume. We are good consumers. Are you a good consumer? Well, the marketing strategies are very interesting, catering to um, older people, the baby boomers, Generation X, Generation Y? Is it using it socially? Is it using it medically? It's just very interesting to see all the different marketing as cannabis and hemp become products, legal products around the world. As with scientists and engineers, there's new vehicles to uptake cannabis. You no longer have to smoke a big joint. You can have a quiet, discreet vape that's very high octane, so use it small. You can rub it on your arm topically to reduce swelling, to reduce pain. Um, and there's all sorts of other ways to uptake cannabis or hemp, and that's exciting to see what's coming out next. For me, knowledge equals financial opportunities. I had a knowledge base both from the commercial horticultural space, learning environmental systems, but also the cannabis space. And I am that bridge to help cannabis growers from small scale, gaining business capital investment to them, to large scale, as we see the Jungle Boys, Canacraft, uh, Select. There's oodles and oodles of brands. All of them are buying cannabis somewhere at large scale. They're processing it. They're producing a product. They're packaging that product. All that's interesting, but I am under cultivation, the gap for cultivators to uh, grow consistently quality products. Other drawers for horticulture for me are the veggie market that I came from. Europe has already learned because of low land mass, depleted land mass without nutrients. How do we grow crops to sustain our world? We live in the Bay Area. We are on the top of the 80. We're in the top 20% of the world, and where we live with our TVs, our food choices, our cars, all of our privilege that we get, we take for granted. What about the rest of the 80% of the world? They're struggling less than us. They're struggling more than us. Food is a big factor for the world, and that's exciting. How do we grow in more rigorous places, consistent food, quality food? Sustainability. Our oceans are dying. Our corals dying. The jungle rainforest was a big thing in my past as a youth. They're being depleted. We don't hear about that anymore. I worry for my kids. I remember going to school in Davis in the early 90s, mid 90s, and learning that in 2020 we'd be at the point of no return for certain marks with CO2, with rainforests, with animals, endangered species. And we're here and we have reached those marks. So, sustainability for our world to grow plants more sustainable, especially food, has a big place in my heart. I'm just going to quickly go for these next couple slides and then I'm going to stop. I just want to show you all the environmental systems in a greenhouse. A greenhouse is heated by the sun. It has light from the sun. There's solar gain that creates heat. You have to get that heat out through natural ventilation or through forced ventilation or through chillers. They're very expensive to run, but to lower the temperature in your greenhouse. If it's in the wintertime, you have this little tiny piece of plastic all over your greenhouse and it's snowing outside. That does not give any insulation at all. So you have to produce heat, efficient heat, because you need lots of heat to keep your crops growing in the wintertime. Or maybe you don't grow in the wintertime. Location, location, location for whatever greenhouse it is. All the lettuce in our nation comes from California and Arizona, like 90% because of location. Lots of sun, not too hot, not too cold. But in this greenhouse too, we have air movement. You have to irrigate your plants, you have to fertilize your plants, and you hopefully all those environmental systems are being controlled by a controller that optimizes everything and reduces energy use. This heating and cooling and controls part of this, which was a slide from one of my speeches over the years. I've spoken at the NCIA, the National Cannabis Industry Association, Canacons. The big show nowadays is in Vegas. MJ BizCon. I've spoken at these, or I've hosted panels based on my knowledge base being that bridge. So this was based for the NCIA, but skipping heating, cooling, and controls, let's just go to the end. What is next for horticulture? There's more people in our world. We have less fertile land. How are we going to feed everybody? That's a question. CO2 is rising faster and faster. I just saw this great show about the dying coral reefs, and in some parts of our oceans, temperature has already risen 3 to 4 degrees centigrade already. Man, that's crazy. Our world, our oceans are dying, corals dying. It's an issue. How do we make more plants to feed the world using less energy? Are GMOs really the future, as Monsanto says? You know, their values and their standards and their goals are true, but will GMOs have other effects that might not be so beneficial? Horticulture's been my space. It's been good for me. I make a good living. I work for myself. What do you want to do? And is horticulture a space that you might want to get into as an engineer or a scientist or a different position? There's a lot of facets to it, as there are a lot of facets to all niche industries. And I'm happy to be a part of this one. So giving you half of my prepared presentation, perhaps the second half on environmental systems will be another time, but thank you for the time. I appreciate being able to share my path to where I currently am, working with scientists and engineers. And now, Rosalie, if there are any questions from you or others, I'm here and happy to take them. What advice would you have for people interested in venturing into the cannabis industry? Well, it's really what do you want to do? There's not too many folks who have 20 years of growing cannabis under their belt like I do, nor 20 years in environmental systems, enclosed environment agriculture like I do. My partner, Crystal, she works for the largest vape company in the US. Actually, they say in the world, Curaleaf. She works for the Select branch. She sells vape cartridges, gummies, edibles, and topicals. She works with a bunch of young kids who don't know uh, much about cannabis, and they're learning as they go. So how do you get into the cannabis industry? You have to get a entry level position, perhaps at whatever facet of the industry you want. Is it retail? Is it manufacturing? Is it processing or marketing? Obviously, if you want to get in the marketing side of cannabis specific, going to school for marketing would be a great start. Doing projects that you might have to do in school, do them on something live, do them on a cannabis product, do them on an idea that you might have, a different way to package something that's child tamper proof, that's easy to access for adults, that looks cool for whatever market you're going for. If you want to go into cultivation, cannabis is just like any other plant. If you can grow a really strong tomato, you can probably grow a good cannabis plant. There's a lot of great ag programs at Davis, Fresno, Cal Poly, San Luis, Texas A&M that teach you how to grow a variety of plants. And now that cannabis is becoming more legal, also cannabis. Arizona, University of Arizona, Tucson now talks about cannabis. Oklahoma State or something in Oklahoma now has cannabis programs. And also there's a Colorado Boulder something that has cannabis specific programs. If you want to get into that, look at that into that more. But know kind of what you're after. When I got out of college, I went to a winery and I thought I wanted to work at a winery. And I met to the grower, not the grower, but the winemaker. And the guy said, "Oh man, great. You sound really excited to work here. So what do you want to do?" And that stumped me, man, because I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't know if I wanted to grow the grape or mix the grape juice to make wine or to work at the tasting room. So I didn't get that job because I didn't have an answer. So know what you want to do and at least the trajectory path and to build the blocks that you need to get to that job, which won't be the end all, which will just be another part of your path, but you have that direction. Another question is, what simple things can growers do to be more environmental friendly? Um, Reduce, reuse, recycle. Reuse your pot. Reuse your medium if you can. Uh, there's a lot of great software to manage water versus fertilizer injection, to manage the EC or ppm of the fertilizer based on the plant needs. Grow with the sun. Why are folks using 1,000-watt HPS lights grown in warehouses, raising the cost of production of a pound to $1,000 sometimes, where if you grow it outside, the cost per pound could be $200, being way more sustainable. And I see that's where cannabis is going in at some point, more like grapes and tobacco. It'll be grown outside, it'll be seasonal. But right now, it's the flush out, and there's a market for $60 eighths, and there won't be perhaps in the future. How's the drought affecting in the industry, man? The drought is affecting all agricultural industries. I have friends out in Guerneville who have a CSA, community supported agriculture. They've been running it for years. For the last 2 years, their well is empty. They cannot grow on their land, growing vegetables, and they also have cattle. That's non-cannabis, but that's affecting vegetables. A lot of farmers have water rights here in California and bought water rights, and often politicians give agricultural folks and industrial folks water over homeowners. Our water is often way more expensive to water our lawns than it is to irrigate a field of tomatoes. The water consumption for a pound of tomatoes grown outdoors being irrigated at a large level because of um, evaporation. I don't know what the water usage is, but let's just say it's a pound or it's a gallon of water for a pound of tomatoes. And I bet you it's more. And I bet you growing hydroponically indoors where you're growing year round, uh, giving short bursts of irrigation water and fertilizer water, the irrigation water will be cut by 60 to 70%. Now, I don't know if it's a gallon per pound of tomatoes, but I do know growing hydroponically will save you 60 to 70% of water and 40 to 60% of fertilizer. Those are ways to uh, grow more food sustainably using less inputs. So yes, the drought is affecting outdoor crop production, especially and as we're seeing in Europe, there's going to be more and more indoor food production with lettuce and tomatoes, as we're currently seeing, but that will continue. What simple things can growers do environmental friendly? Water, nutrients, lights. Current drought is affecting us. Are most growers using solar panels to supplement the energy use? If they're growing outdoor in a greenhouse, yes, because if you're growing in a greenhouse, you might have supplemental lights, but the grid of solar panels can power your pumps that and your motors that turn the fans on and run the irrigation system and run the cooling and heating system. If you're in a warehouse and growing pot and have 1,000 watt lights, you need, I don't know what it is, but like a mile or 3 mile of solar panels to power that. So it's not sustainable. So if you're growing indoors, solar panels isn't the solution. it's a nice marketing gimmick. Hey, we have solar panels. We're growing indoor and using lots of electricity, and the solar panels turn on the lights in the bathroom. It's a marketing thing, but it's not real. But if you're growing in a greenhouse using the sun outside, a couple warehouses worth of solar panels can supplement your energy usage and typically cover motors, pumps, and the major things of a greenhouse. So yes, that is happening. Howlings, Windset down in the Oxnard area growing tomatoes, Gotham Greens, rooftop growers on the East Coast and the Midwest. They're all utilizing not only solar panels, but also uh, energy generation through efficient generators, capturing the heat and CO2 to then be used in the greenhouse, CO2 as a nutrient heat during the winter months. So there are ways, there are growers trying to be more sustainable using less energy.
So I think that's it for our questions today. And thank you so much, Morris, for your presentation and taking the time to speak with us. And I'm going to go ahead and end the recording.